Welcome to the Bold SLP podcast. We are so happy that you're here and can't wait to share with you all of the amazing conversations we've been having.
We are the co-founders of the Bold SLP Collective, and we are also your hosts, Lisa, Desi, and myself, Ingrid. Each of us has a variety of experiences in all things bilingual and bimodal speech-language pathology. You'll get to know us pretty well on here.
We started this podcast to share our lived experiences, but also because we want to bring advocacy and cultural humility to the forefront of every speech therapy conversation. We hope that you'll join us each week, and we hope that you enjoy this episode.
Welcome back to the Bold SLP podcast. We have Ingrid and Desi and Lisa. And today we have Dr. V with us, and we are so excited. She wanted to introduce herself, even though I had a bunch of accolades and all these credentials I wanted to list off, but she thought it'd be best if she just gives her own bio. So, Dr. please tell us who you are.
I honestly just wanted to go with the flow today. So my name is Valencia Perry, and I'm a bilingual, bidialectal speech-language pathologist. I'm from Washington, D.C. I'm an assistant professor at Howard University. I'm going up for tenure, so I hope that by the time you hear this, I'll be an associate professor. Please pray for me.
Yay.
I'm a private practice SLP. I mean, that's really the only thing you can do in academia. You know, it's kind of hard to work somewhere when you're at a university. And I love it. I love being a clinician. I love supervising. I love treating. And I absolutely love doing research. And so I'm just trying to continue the research program that we're working on, increase collaborations, and just really contribute to the field so that opportunities grow for everyone and that the playing field really is level.
A leveled playing field. I heard in your intro that you called yourself bidialectical. Can we dive into that a little bit? Because we are the bilingual SLPs, you know, so I like that term bidialectical.
Yeah. I just, I was on Jordan, JRC, the SLP. I have to shout her out. I was on her podcast, and that was like the first public place where I said that. And I've just been saying it. I've been saying it all along, but I really, really owned it there and, out loud. I think for the longest time, in at least from the mentor, not all of them, but some of the mentors and some of the other people that I know in the field. I worked at ASHA in the national office, so I want to disclose that. So I've had a front end and a back end experience in our field, right? And so I really know how a lot of things work, and I'm always still learning. I don't know everything, but there's a don't tell us about your cultural background. It's okay. I mean, we care about culture, but we don't care. Kind of that attitude. It's like, we care, but like that's enough. So I really wanted to step into. I'm Black. What do you think I speak? Do you think I don't speak? I'm from DC. Not to say that all Black people speak African American English. I'm not saying that. I mean, what is Black? In certain countries there is no Black because the whole country is Black. In other countries there are no Blacks. So I mean, it's a American concept. But I just want to bring voice to the concept that people in America don't all speak mainstream American English, and we're not all expected to, and it's okay. That is the language maybe of certain marketplaces. It's not the language of even the marketplace as of today, with the internet being so powerful. So that I get calls often from places, programs, clinicians who need assistance with working with diverse children. So don't ask me to help these little Black kids if you don't want to acknowledge that I speak African American English. I am bidialectal. Some people can speak multiple dialects of English, but African American English and the standard or the mainstream variant of American English are starkly different. And so I want to make sure that people understand that, and that it kind of softens the mood and it invites people to ask questions about it, which I want to talk about it because I don't think that we should act like we don't see color and we don't hear differences, accents in our voices. That's what makes us Skittles, it's a good thing. Yeah, so that's why I say it, and I say it in my conference bios, on websites. I'm like, I'm bidialectal in case you need someone who can translate or code switch. So it's a joke, but it's also again, leveling the playing field. AAE is not ghetto, right? AAE is not the language of Ebonics. It is not Ebonics. It is a dialect. It's a legitimate, any dialect is a legitimate dialect. And if everyone from the community speaks it, it can't be wrong. So, just bringing it up and so that we can kind of continue the conversation and get over it, because they did the research on this in the 60s. So we should be past this.
Yeah. When I spoke to you, you had mentioned like, this is really basic, Lisa. This is basic. Like, don't come to me with these basic things. And the expectation that you have is amazing, because you really do want to level the playing field. And it's not leveled. And these dialects that you're referring to, which are legitimate languages, are seen as lesser than, even less than less, seen as disorders. And then you come in and you're like, nope. They're just regular languages like you and I speak. Like, what is it anyway? It's just communicating with each other. And if the whole community is able to communicate this way, why is it a disorder here? So I love, like, you just blew my mind on the SLPs podcast, because I was just randomly listening to episodes and then I heard you speak. And when you said bidialectical, I ran to my husband. I'm like, you are bidialectical, and so is your mother. And it's like, all of a sudden, it's not this source of shame that, like, I don't want anyone to hear me speak this way because it's wrong or broken. Absolutely not. It's like a legitimate. So I love that you brought that to the forefront, because everything about it was like friendly and kind and deep, so deep, like right off the bat. But I wanted to talk about when they bring you in to work with these diverse students. Diverse meaning what? Just not white, I guess. I'm just going to call out the different things very clearly here. Sure. But I had written, okay, let me see. Why should we move away from the traditional standard and favor dynamic assessments?
Is whether you like it or not, that's not the standard anymore, sweetie.
Add a sweetie on there.
It's not the standard. What is the standard?
I know we talked about that, Dr. V. Or Valencia. I moved here from Mexico when I was 16, and I found myself in SLP, not knowing anything about ASHA or, our demographics, and being the only Mexican American in my cohort. And I found myself going home to do an assignment for my assessment class to find a child to practice the TELD on. And I found my neighbor, and my parents live in El Paso, Texas. My neighbor is Mexican American, bilingual, mostly Spanish and then English when, she went to kindergarten. And I found myself very early on in my career realizing that these tests are not made for people like me. They're not made for a lot of us. They're not made for a lot of people who are not white and who are not monolingual English speakers. And that was my first awakening as a student, that I had to go learn something else than what I was being taught when I was in assessment class. And that was my worst grade in my career, because I asked questions like, what do I do with these tests that don't fit? And they didn't like that.
Yeah, you can't make a test based on someone's culture. And, just quickly, Mexico is an issue. Let's just say that, because even the Spanish tests aren't for you, right? Sometimes they are, and sometimes they aren't. And you can be from Mexico, and it can still not be for you, because what do you call corn?
Elote.
Right. But if you're from South Mexico, it's maíz.
Maíz.
So, right. And I had a child that I was working with yesterday whose mom makes the black tortillas. They are so, I was like, you got to give me some black tortillas. I don't know where. She's like, no, it's from, it's from the blue. She calls it blue.
The blue corn.
But the Mexicans that I know from El Paso call it the purple corn. And the Mexicans from Veracruz, they don't eat that. They're and,
that's
slaves,
a northern
slaves
thing.
Went to Veracruz, right? They speak totally different. They're like an island almost. They're like Caribbean.
They're Caribbean, yes.
They're Caribbean. So everybody's from Mexico, but they're all so different, and they use different language, different words, different, so even there are different dialects in countries. And this is what I want people to understand. It's normal. No one in any country speaks the standard.
Nope.
It's just not the way it is. And I'm not against the standard. I'm not like, oh, no standards. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, what is the purpose of the test? What are we using this for? Let's let's make sure we're doing what that's what validity and reliability are. Content validity is, does the test what it purports to test? So if you're testing me on something that damn well I don't know, you're not testing me according to the test. You're bringing in culture, you're bringing in other societal things, economic status, and that's not the nature of this test. So yeah, it just goes back to the point again. This is why I preach language sample analysis. This is why I'm so into I have to do research, because the more that we address these issues and we see that there are so many flaws in the system, the more it makes us question, well, then what should we do? That's always the next question. Well, then what are we supposed to do? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm not God.
Do the best we can with what we have. And once we know, we need to do better.
Yeah.
Don't ignore it. Don't act like it's not there and it's not happening. Yeah.
I feel like there's a critical thinking piece, though, that has to go along with that. And that necessarily isn't taught in our graduate programs. Like, I try to do this with my grandparents. They're both Cuban, and they, hear people talk, oh, well, he's speaking es español, like they kind of put down the other person's Spanish, which is really funny, because since it sounds like you're a Spanish speaker, that Cuban Spanish is not highly respected.
Yes, it's Caribbean Spanish. They dropping all the S's.
Like we leave out all the letters, and it's so funny to me, because I'm sitting with them and I'm like, you realize, like, you're making a structure within a structure. Like, you believe that there is this grand order of things, and that somebody speaks this perfect language. Like, it's so disruptive to, like, it's what's helping build this idea of the standard even among our own communities. And it's really disturbing to me that we're still having these conversations. We're still attributing quality to a certain standard, but nobody can even, it gets to the point where, like, nobody can even name the standard anymore. And I'm wondering, I'm wondering too, like, how much of our own community feeds off of that messaging and internalizes that. And that's my concern, I guess. I feel like sometimes I'm just trying to undo the harm of the majority when I work with these families and say, no, there's nothing wrong with saying maíz or elote or whatever. Like, I don't know if you've witnessed in clinical practice or in your work at Howard. It's just something that I find fascinating as a practicing SLP.
Yes, and that's why I love to toggle between dialects and languages all day long, just to demonstrate, I don't care if I don't speak, Spanish that well. I speak English too. And I speak 2 dialects of English. I don't care if I don't speak mainstream American English. I don't care. I use language as a tool. So language it's not my intellect. Intellect can be measured through language, but language is not intellect. Just like language is not culture, but you can gauge culture through language, but it's not culture. So there's a, interplay between all of these things. And, we're not here to set the standard. We're just here to acknowledge, what are we here for? We're here to assess someone's ability. And so the ability has to be assessed in a vehicle that allows for the best, sorting of the data. And we can't sort the data accordingly if we're using improper tools. I can't measure speed, right, if I'm using a yardstick. I mean, I could, but I'd also need a timer, and I need to have several yardsticks. I mean, what kind of speed are we talking about? So, right, it's like, what are you testing? Back to your critical thinking point, which I think is phenomenal. And I mean, that's what my research is all about. And my mentor, like, she's published a lot on critical thinking and speech language pathology. It's amazing how we're not learning about thought, and we're not learning about mediated cognition, right, which is thinking, and what that has, how that relates to language ability, because that's what we're looking at. Language is a way to convey ideas. So it's the wrapping of the idea. So we should be looking at the idea. It doesn't mean that we're overstepping a psychologist's boundaries by looking into thinking. We need to you cannot look at language without thinking. Language is, why is there pragmatics? Because it has to be socially appropriate. So it has to be based on thinking and cultural rules. So they're both very important. So yeah, I don't think we spend enough time really understanding the neurological components, the actual physiological, aspects that go into what happens when someone has a thought, what areas of the brain get ignited when we're thinking about certain topics, and when we're trying to receive information, process information, and convey information. I don't think there's enough stress. We only think of that in neuro class. No, that's in school age language. That's in stuttering. That's in early intervention. That's in voice disorders. It's everywhere. You cannot avoid the cranial nerves if you're talking about language, because it all goes back to how the brain is functioning, how that person is perceiving information, processing information, and then using language to express an idea. And so sometimes if they're missing the mark, it could be the thinking and not the language. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yes. I love everything that you just said. I'm stealing the yardstick thing.
Yeah, I can't let go of the yardstick.
Yeah, honestly, I was telling Jackie the other day, we were talking about assessment, and I'm like, sometimes I just get so tired of defending myself over and over and over again and explaining myself why this is not appropriate, why I did a non-word repetition task instead of giving the self and giving you scores that are not okay. And I get so tired, and you just gave me a new little tool to fight back.
Yeah. I say it in schools all the time. What do you expect from me? I'm not selfish, right? CELFISH, right? I love giving the self. I do. The self is my go-to test. I'm not against the self, but I'm not selfish. That's not the only tool I'm going to use. We know that the sensitivity and the specificity of the self is not that accurate. And I mean, it's enough to be published, but it's not going to give you a specific learning or language issue. It's going to give you a broad base from where to start. And then you're going to have to dive deeper, especially if it's an older student, because they speak well. Usually, right? Their issues are with thinking. It is with retaining linguistic information, right? Or processing like a lot of information, right? So with older students, I mean, really, it can be a challenge when you use the self, unless you give literally the whole test. And still there's some issues with the grammatical judgment, like in a sentence assembly, when you're dealing with people. And I work with a lot of Latino students who, the Spanish influence to the English is significant. And so giving them the self is already going to put them at a disadvantage. So, I'll give the self to start. I might give the core language, but that might be it. And then I'm going to give some more curriculum-based assessment measures. And I'm always going to do a language sample analysis. It can be formal or informal. I can do computerized, or I can do, my little quick one, and, just easily record, transcribe it, and then just analyze it according to at least the basic 5 components of language, right? And from a general sense, and get some percentages going. And so that I can really get an idea of how this student is functioning at from a morphosyntactic level all the way to a discourse level, and then asking family members and using checklists and doing observations and maybe even a portfolio assessment. I've even reviewed work from students, right? And that all comes into the table, so that it's not just relying on a test score. I would never let a test score judge someone. A test score is a picture that you took one day. It could be pixelated or it could be unpixelated. The resolution varies depending on, again, the tool that you use. So why would I use one picture from one day to remember how someone looks? No, I'm going to take multiple pictures across multiple days in different settings, so that I know how they look from the side, from the front, when they're smiling, when they're frowning, when they're flexing, when the hair done and when it's not done. Then I know who you are, right? But I don't know who you are. I just took one picture on one day. That could have been a bad day.
Yeah. Oh, it could have been a really bad hair day.
Yes.
It's always a bad day. And I think that we're waiting for the possible day with the worst possible tool to get the most funding, because I think that's what it's all tied into, right? If we're not connected to the children, if we have no stakes, and we're not really trying to get to know them, we're just trying to put a label or a code and get funding, I think that's where this whole system is really, really flawed, because I don't know how much we're really looking to support these kids, or if we're just looking for funding. Some places I spoke to, it felt like there were like dollar signs over kids. Oh, I have like 3 coded kids in my class, so that's this much funding for our classroom. I really hate that. So everything that you're saying now is so deep. I wish I could take a class with you. Like the last class we had, I was like, I have to share this with my Bold SLP girls. Like, I feel like I'm doing you a disservice if I don't share you with the whole world. So here we are. And we're going to wrap up a little bit, but I hope we could talk again another day, because this is just, wow.
Yeah. And I have one specific question, since you brought up, Lisa, you brought up the concept of money. I wanted to bring up the concept of time, because the type of evaluation that you're talking about, Dr. V, Valencia, I don't, I'm honored that you're here with us. But the type of evaluation you're talking about, I worry about, like school-based SLPs, you know, again, like the expectation is quick turnaround, get the scores. We're going to put that against an eligibility form, and we're going to determine if this kid needs speech therapy. The single snapshot, right? Like we're literally like gluing it to the eligibility form. I mean, I'm wondering what you would say to an SLP about how to change that dynamic within their own practice, if they're taxed for time, or if they have just a huge caseload or a never-ending list of evaluations. What would be, if there was anything you could recommend for them to just pivot and do differently, what would it be?
Embrace informal assessments would be the first thing I would say. I think that they need permission. They look for permission to use informal tools. There are so many textbooks from grad school that have checklists in the back of them that could be very useful. And you can do a thorough assessment that's informal, and you might not yield a score, but that doesn't mean that the information isn't useful, and you can report that. Another thing I would say is, if you want something formal, do a language sample analysis, because you can ask that student to retell a story. You can ask that student to, answer questions about a story, comprehension questions. And so now you're getting retelling and critical thinking, because you're doing comprehension questions. You can use expository discourse, or you can use persuasive. You can have them tell you reasons why they agree or disagree. Students love telling you why they disagree with taking away recess. I always ask that, to middle schoolers. So it just depends on the setting that you're in, and learning how to navigate that setting to the best of your ability, and not letting people tell you how to be a clinician, because they will tell you what you can and cannot do. And that, at the end of the day, and see, I've been in a lot of I'm from DC. Okay. The school system has been sued a lot. Right. Yeah. And so due process hearings, right, they let you know, like, you didn't do this, and you weren't, doing your due diligence for the student. Well, you can't tell me how to be an SLP, and no one cares that you have 50 kids on your caseload. You still didn't do your due diligence with this one. So in my opinion, it's best to not see everybody. If you have to wait and just, if I can only see them 2 times a month. I can't see them every week. I mean, it's better to go at a pace that you can manage than to try to overdo it and mess up and put the wrong kid's name on an evaluation report because you were doing it at midnight, or to, mistakenly, use some incorrect data or wrong interpretation of a standardized test because you were just rushing to get through it. And now when you get to the meeting, this is how they get you. You get to the meeting and they're asking you to tell about the kid, and what you're saying is inaccurate. And the parent is like, that's not my kid. Mm-hmm. So you don't have a good picture. You've got a foggy picture. And it's because you let the system tell you how to work because you feel pressured. It's your job. And it's hard to really look adversity in the eyes, look an administrator in the eyes and say, I found a better way to do this. Because people traditionally want you to do, especially when you're in a school system. When you're in a charter school, there's usually more wiggle room, but a school system is kind of hard because they require it. I say just meet the requirement however you can. For example, DC required us to have a standardized assessment tool. I will give them a vocabulary test, right? And so then now it's knocked out. Now I'm doing my informal assessments for language, and I'm going to use some norms, and I'm going to use, if I use the SALT, for example, the SALT databases have norms in it. They still need more for diverse students, but we're working on that. But I would use different tools to get a clear picture that I can use so that when I'm speaking about a student and I put it on that IEP, it actually reflects their performance and not, a score, because the score is not their performance. So they tell you have to use the score, but then they ask you when you're describing prior levels of functioning and when you're describing the goals and when you're describing why they're not, performing at a level that meets the demands of the curriculum, the test won't tell you that. Mm-hmm. It won't tell you that.
Exactly.
It's not.
You've got to use informal measures, right? And get work samples and get teacher interviews and use the teacher interview checklist. You know, there's so many tools that we can use that we're not capitalizing on because we feel pressured to use the regular, you know, run of the mill OWLs, CASEL, SELF. I'm not against them. I'm just saying that sometimes they're not the best tools to use with certain demographics. And you've got to just get over that and just move on now and stop. You know, we're still asking people for permission to think as clinicians because we weren't taught these things at grad school, so we don't know where to start. And it's very overwhelming. But I'm telling you, sometimes you can go back to those textbooks and look at those checklists, or you can use, you know, get some textbooks of from people like Celeste. I just got off I had a conversation with her on Monday. Celeste Roseberry McKibben, her textbook alone will save your life. It will save your life.
What is the name of the textbook, please?
You think I know?
I can look it up.
I know which one you're talking about.
I think multicultural students,
yeah.
Something with language. She's got another one that most SLPs don't know about. I'm going to put it on my Instagram. It's called Working with Students from Low SES Backgrounds. It's a small little paperback book, but it's very insightful and helpful. Kay Payne, my mentor, has a lot of materials, publications. You know, she's got a lot on test taking, especially with the praxis for diverse students. Kate Crowley she's at Columbia. They have a website that's very helpful, especially when working with bilingual Spanish speaking groups. I like Leah Fabiano Smith's publication on phonological assessment with bilingual Spanish speaking students, because she talks about using informal ways and like calculating percent consonants correct, things like that, which is a better measure because it's based off of their phonemic repertoire rather than an ideal. Who else I really love? Of course, Liz Pena stuff. You know, Alejandro Bryce, he's in like Florida. He's got some good stuff because they have like Venezuelans mixed in. A lot of the research, you got to remember, comes from the universities. And so these faculty members are usually using convenient sampling. So the research that came out of Temple often uses a group of people in Mexico. The research that comes out of like Arizona tends to come from people who are like Chicano, right? Or like in North Mexico. The research that comes from California is going to be more Baja, right? Because it's usually Southern California. The research that comes from Florida is going to be more Caribbean and Venezuelan. So and also Temple has a lot of Puerto Ricans in Philly that they do convenient sampling from. So you got to remember who's using what. So you from Bolivia? I'm sorry, we don't have no tests. I don't know a place.
No large sample, unfortunately.
Population. So it's convenient sample. Likewise, the research from Julie Washington and you know, that's coming out for African American English is going to be based off of like New Orleans and Louisiana. Even though she's in like Missouri, she does a lot of research, at least that I've been seeing, that's been coming from that area. Toya Wyatt, a great sociolinguist, she's in California. Lisa Green is in Michigan. She's not even an SLP, but she's very familiar with us, and she's got a wonderful book called African American English that was published in like 2003 that is still really, really helpful if you don't know about African American English. That alone can save you a lot of time. I love the Shipley book. There's a book by Shipley and Michael. That assessment in SLP.
I had that one in grad school. I sold it.
That book has a lot of resources. So you know, there's a lot that you can use. We just gotta you have to dig a little deep because no one's really laying it out there for you. But there's places that you can start, especially if you're school based. There are many things I always tell people, I love the qualitative reading inventory. It doesn't really talk about diversity. It's a reading assessment. But if I do a language sample and then I do the qualitative reading inventory and I do narrative and expository, and they have it for each grade from pre-K all the way through 12th grade, now I can find out their reading level. And if I know their reading level and I can see their language ability, then it makes so much sense when I'm talking about them in the school. So do you see why the lawyers are like, I'm messing with her? We're going to
They say your name is the other way.
Moving on.
Yeah, we're not gonna mess with her. She knows what she's talking about, right? Because I'm painting a picture that's clear and pixelated.
It's so true.
You can't argue with me because I'm not making this up.
I always tell these ladies that's my favorite moment in the meetings, whenever you say the example, like, oh, this was what the test item wanted and this is what the child responded. And when the parents click and they're like, oh yeah, that sounds just like my child and this is why, like, you know, it's like the best moments when they're like, oh my gosh, you really did get to know my kid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
mentioned so many like
Yeah, our
authors,
show notes are gonna be like
thank you.
gold.
Thank you,
Yes.
because the questions come in like, how does she know so much? How can we be like her? I think that's what's gonna happen. But what about you? Like, where can we find you? Can you tell us a little bit about your handle and your website, your research?
Yeah, my Instagram is at language_research_therapy. I don't know why I picked these long names. My website is seriously, it's so long. Why did I do this? It is Speak Right, WRITE. So SPEAKWRITE, therapy, ed. What was I thinking? speakrightTherapyEd.com. And my lab is the it's called the Soul Lab, ya tú sabes, Soul, Sociolinguistics of Language and Literacy. So SOL with a, cubed, a 3 at the top. And I don't even know that website. So, but you can get to it from my Speak Right Therapy Ed website. I'm at Howard University in the Department of Communication Sciences and Disorders. And I do coach SLPs. I just finally officially started doing that, only because it got out of hand. Just giving away lots of information. Eventually I started saying I have to put this somewhere. So if you go to my main website, I do have a blog kind of linked in, and I discuss some issues on the blog, and I have resources that I like to just share, because again, it gets old, it gets routine. All right, people are coming to me with the same, especially when I go talk at conferences, right? The same questions. Well, what can I start with, and what can I use? So I just submitted a publication. And I just want to announce this in case anyone goes through this. I got rejected. I got my rejection letter yesterday. So I'm going to I'm going to look at the feedback and see if I can, it was very heavy. It was about the systems in speech language pathology and how they perpetuate discrimination. So I figured I'd get rejected. So I'm going to repurpose this and see where I can submit it. And use the feedback, because it still is always helpful. And sometimes you get stuck in your own, thing, and it's good to have external support. And I'm going to, once I get that published, I'll link it on my site. So I try to link some of my publications, or most of them, on my site, because people sometimes ask for those things. So yeah, I'm starting to create a hub, but of course it's traditional things as well, like the ASHA practice portal and cultural linguistic diversity. Some things are dated, but some aren't. They're still very useful, and they point you to other websites, other associations. In BASLA, the National Association, it's called National Black Association of Speech, Language, and Hearing. I always think NBA, SLA, that's how I remember. And then the caucuses, the Hispanic caucus, the Asian American, Pacific Islander caucus. They've got a Native American caucus. So they're different, ASHA caucuses. And I just think also, when you find research, think like, well, how can I get this research for free? You'd be surprised. If you just Google Scholar it, sometimes the articles that Google asks you to pay for, if you hit Google Scholar, it'll be free. The PDF will be available. And so you can get access to research articles through there, and look up who the authors are and reach out to them. Usually they're more than willing to share their information. I know I am, and I know that's how I've collaborated with Celeste Roseberry McKibben and Marilyn Napold. I mean, just reaching out to these people is how you get these opportunities, and you get more information, and they also want to hear from you. And that's why I'm so slow to publish, is because I'm a clinical researcher. I'm actually seeing people and publishing and doing studies. Most researchers are doing studies, so they need clinicians to speak up. I tell clinicians this all the time. We need you to stop complaining. Keep your complaint, but go to the researcher and present it as a problem, so that we can address the problems. Because if you're complaining, no one wants to hear someone complain. Yes, it is hard, but and honestly, I think clinicians have way more insight, because researchers are seeing everything in a lab, in a vacuum. And even when we do go into the school, we're not there enough to get the real true essence of the school, right? And the environment and the demands that we have on us as school-based clinicians, or in hospitals as hospital-based clinicians, understanding the productivity requirements. So just being able to kind of express your problems to ASHA and your problems to researchers, I think that could put you in a better light to actually get the problem addressed. And I'm not saying don't complain, but go to counseling and get that out, and then find a way to present it as a problem.
These little. So are we ready for our last words? So what we do, we take something from what you said that's really resonated with us, although it's really going to be hard to just pick one thing. But the idea of not asking permission to think critically. That is a big one. I will take that with me forever. Because I don't know, there's this weird shame about questioning the system. Who are we? But we are them. Like, we represent these little ones who can't speak up for themselves. And so not to ask permission to think is what I'm taking with me. What about you?
I love that. I was gonna say, I think I question a lot of stuff because I majored in something else, so I'm always like thinking. I majored in English and Spanish, and it was a lot of literature. I read a lot of books, so I have so many questions. And I think for me the biggest takeaway, part of that critical thinking piece, is the tool. What's your tool? Like, that's my word, because I think that that's the best question I could probably ask myself as a clinician going forward all the time is, what's my tool? What am I measuring? Because if you're right, if the tool's no good, then what's the measurement for? So
Right. I have a lot going on in my brain, because I want to say like empowerment, because when I left grad school, I left and I never wanted to look back because I was so beat down. Like you were saying with the critical thinking, like I felt like I also came in from another field. I came in from psychology, linguistics, and then before then pre-med. So I had a lot of the bases of what they were. And so I asked a lot of questions, and you were saying the critical thinking piece. I feel like they were trying to beat it out of me. And I'm just like glad that I survived. But just talking to you and then several other people on Instagram the last year, I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have run from academia like that. Like maybe I can go back there and, like you said, do something instead of complain. So my last word after this conversation, Valencia, is empowerment. And I wanted to say hope, but I used that yesterday. So I'm just feeling really hopeful. Yes.
But that's what my goal is. I mean, if you read anything from me or see anything, I'm always preaching empowerment. Like that is the one thing I want to do, is empower SLPs to do things differently. We're in COVID changed things, and nothing is the same. The playing field is leveled. That's the secret. The secret is it's leveled. Everything has changed. And so now is the time to start setting new sails. Jim Rohn said your philosophy is the set of the sail. The ship is only going to go where the sail is set. And so we can set new sails. We can change systems now because nothing is the same. Everything has been disrupted to the greatest possible degree. And now we actually are using Zoom and technology in ways that we could have used this like this since 2006, right? But there was no institutional pressure. And now we've got access to millions of data and so much information that is actually overwhelming. The answers are all there. It's just overwhelming. And we don't know how to process information at this level, right? So it's not about getting it, it's about using it and having the courage to do something different, because the system is not real. It's just a social construct that people decided to implement, and somebody wrote it, and somebody wrote these policies, somebody wrote these rules, and they're probably retired. It's time for us to change it. It's just time. It's already happened. We're just not acknowledging it yet. It already is. It's a new day. And it's not bad, and it's no one's fault. No one's bad. You know, my mentors are white. My mentors are black. There's nothing wrong. It's all love. Are you God's child or not? Right? Do you care or not? It's not about, who's better or who's less than. We're beyond that. That was ancient thinking. We don't think like that anymore.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be more intellectual. So we shouldn't be doing things that pagans do. We're not pagans. No offense if you're a pagan. But
We're a mix.
Yeah, we're supposed to be the enlightened generation, right? So if you're enlightened, that means you're illuminating. You're bringing light. Light is energy. It's infinite energy, right? It's knowledge. Light is knowledge and information conveyed in energy form. So that's what we're doing. And it really takes a new way of thinking. And so I think it's just the perfect timing. Millennials and Gen Z and baby boomers too. It takes everybody. We can't have any one thing. Any one thing is bad. Homogeneous is not good. everything needs to be heterogeneous. We need a mix all the time. There should never be too many of anybody. There shouldn't be too many Black people in Basla. There shouldn't be too many Latinos in the Hispanic caucus. There needs to be a mix. That's the only way you're going to get sound ideas, sound practices, and policies, is if you have representation from everyone, cultural, linguistic, everything. If you're isolated, you're not going to perform well. You're going to be skewed. Yeah.
Yay.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Wisdom imparted.
This was such an honor.
Thank you for listening and supporting the Bold SLP Collective. You can find a closed caption version of this podcast on our YouTube channel. We will also have show notes on our website. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you do all the podcast things. Follow, subscribe, download, and review. And don't forget, we love hearing from you, so connect with us on Instagram at the Bold SLP Collective. Stay bold and humble. See you next time.